And so for tonight's keynote, we're going to mix it up a little bit. No, I'm not going to sing. You didn't think that was funny? Okay. We're going to host an expert panel to discuss SaaS companies, where to draw the line between sales and marketing, and how to truly build a successful SaaS company here in Central Oregon. So I'm going to tell you about the panelists as things are getting settled up here. So focus on me. Focus on me. Okay. Our moderator tonight, hi, Scott. Our moderator tonight is Robert Pease. Robert is my business partner at 44 North Ventures that manages Cascade Angels and a consultant with Heinz Marketing. Robert is a startup veteran. He's held a variety of executive product and, turn the page, marketing roles across 6 venture-backed software startups. Previously, he was vice president of marketing for Seattle-based Gist, acquired by BlackBerry, and CEO of LoopFuse, where he led the sale of the company to Sales Fusion. Over the last 3 years, he's consulted with companies helping design and scale their customer acquisition efforts through his work with Seattle consultancy Heinz Marketing. Chris Bright, VP of Marketing and co-founder of Zapproved, LLC. I'm a big fan of both you and the company. Chris has dedicated his career to working with emerging growth companies and high-tech startups for more than 25 years. He's been with Zapproved since its founding in 2008 and has helped build it into a leader in the legal software market with more than 300 corporate customers, including some of the most recognized brands in the world. Prior to Zapproved, he managed worldwide corporate communications for Pixelworks, a publicly traded semiconductor company where he was also on the team that prepared their IPO in 2000. And Larry Grella, VP of Sales at Amplion. If you guys would like to make your way up here, I'll finish with Larry. Larry is a serial business builder addicted to growing tech startups. And Larry has a passion for building corporate culture and values that map. That's right. That map to processes.
How close do we sit?
I just can't, I mean, it's just, I've just completely lost the room. He has over 2 decades experience running sales, CS, and marketing divisions with the battle scars and gray hair to prove it. Larry's held executive positions and helped transform multiple companies, including Epic, Rich Relevance, Conversant, Bizarre Voice, and more. So thanks, gentlemen, for being here tonight.
Microphone. Thank you, Julie. Thanks, everyone, for having us and for EDCO for putting us together here. Appreciate you guys coming by air and land and having the challenges of getting here and then getting through the city to get here. I'm Robert Pease. It's my first time on the stage here, so I guess I'm making the full circle here in Bend. I came into this room, I think, 2+ years ago. Couldn't believe this group of people, and presentations like we saw tonight just blow me away. So hopefully we'll deliver tonight. I know these guys will as well. My goal as moderator is not to talk a lot. We'll see how that works out. And so far so good. I'm doing good, aren't I?
You're on it.
So, and I'm going to start with one question that it gets framed, right? Who in here is in the software business or cares about the software business? Okay, so a fair amount of folks. And then we can have a second session sometime about all businesses or software businesses, but it's for later. So we're going to talk about software as a service tonight.
How about SaaS? Specifically SaaS.
Is that SaaS or SaaS?
Don't be sassy.
I was about to say, get sassy.
Yes, software.
Uh-oh, what'd you do? We are tech geniuses up here. This is amazing.
Am I back?
Yeah. I'm very territorial.
I know, it's getting out of here. Anyway, so software as a service, a modern way to deliver software via web-based interfaces, and lots of ways to build that software, lots of ways to deploy that software. What we're going to talk about tonight is how to market and sell that software. So good introductions in terms of everyone's point of view. You've been obviously in a SaaS business for 10 years and seen evolutions in how people buy products, try products. You certainly have seen a lot as well. One of the kickoff questions I wanted to start with and get your perspectives on is not so much can you build a successful business in Bend, Oregon. I think it's a broader question around software as a service, and if you can build a successful software as a service business in a secondary market, right? So outside the valley, outside Boston, right? Whether that's Portland, whether that's Bend, whether that's Salt Lake City, and just your perspectives on that.
I just prior to joining Amplion at the end of last year, I was running a company in San Mateo, business intelligence company, SaaS platform. We looked at every alternative possible to leave San Mateo because the cost of acquisition of talent and then retaining that talent was cost prohibitive. So we were looking at secondary markets for over a year, actually. Bend was one that I was pushing for, obviously being an Oregon native, or I was looking at places like Colorado. Yeah, so it's very, very viable. And in fact, a lot of talent that we were luring in, we're asking, do we have thoughts about remote locations as well as getting out of the Bay Area, because no one could afford to even get a home, let alone a starter home, right? So.
Yeah, I second that. I think it's completely possible. And one of the great things about SaaS is you can, it's extremely low capital to start the business. And in fact, it's approved until a surprisingly recent amount of time. We were still operating the company on a credit card payment, monthly credit card payment to AWS. So it doesn't require a lot of capital, and it's really, it doesn't require any particular location either, because you're using somebody else's server. So you free yourself from that hardware. The chains of hardware and trunks and things like that. So unlike previous generation of software companies. So I think it actually, if you look at cloud platforms, they've really democratized the ability to start a company, and a software company in particular, by taking the cost right out of it, and it's only getting lower and lower and lower. I mean, AWS is so far ahead of everybody else. They're turning compute power into a public utility, essentially, where you're going to pay for it just like you pay for electricity by the amount you use on a given day. And that future is coming, but I think how it, to come back to your question, I really feel it also takes the wear out of it anywhere. I mean, you could start one in Juneau, Alaska, and if you can do it there, you can do it anywhere. Including Bend, of course. And I think the real challenge is recruitment and talent. That's where, and to Larry's point, I think that's where place becomes a competitive advantage for a company. And you can come here. I mean, how many people didn't start in Bend and moved to Bend because it's a great place to live? I mean, raise your hand. It's a big part of the room. You can choose to be wherever you want, and if you can get enough vision and enough people following you, they'll come here for sure.
Yeah, great points, and sort of building on that. So seems to be consensus up here, and we'll get in the Q&A later if there's others that feel differently, that you can build a software as a service business in any location, primary market, secondary market, obviously talent being a gating factor on that of what you're building, whatever it is. If you look forward, and you guys at Zapproved are kind of a testament to this as well, which is a kind of a very verticalized or functionally specific application.
We didn't start that way. Pivot.
Well, no, I think that great, and I look forward to hearing about that, which is, I was at the SaaS event down in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago with Justin Johnson from Lead Method, and one of the people on the stage said the next great SaaS opportunity is in vertical market SaaS, right? So broadly defined as what?
Duh.
Right. So talk a little bit about that, right? Like where do you, as you guys certainly, as you've gone through the life cycle of the business, where have you pivoted to and the opportunities you saw, and then what do you see, Larry, from your perspective in terms of where those opportunities are going forward?
Sure. Just to kind of tell you the quick history. I mean, originally Zapproved was the product, and it was a Web 2.0. Everybody remember that back in 2008? It was all the rage, where you had a social component to an app, and we were single instance, multi-tenant, and launched this decision-making and approval workflow tool called Zapproved. Me and Monica Enand, my co-founder, and she's the CEO. And we got that going. We launched our beta in August of 2008. So put that click. September of 2008, Lehman Brothers goes down, Great Recession starts, right? So we were forced to pivot and verticalize. We had some vision, some notion to do that, but it's like we do that or we die. We are toast. And in a recession, nobody's gonna do something that's non-discretionary or discretionary. So we went after non-discretionary funding. or areas, and guess what? Litigation happens to be pretty recession-proof, and someone brought us this idea. Yeah, well, someone had brought this idea of a new market that didn't have an entrenched competitor, so we could attack it without having to take on and invest the capital in marketing and go-to-market to really take down some entrenched competitor, which would be really hard in that type of environment. So we had an open field and a defined need, and we just went and attacked it, but we did it very slowly because of the conditions that we were in. I mean, 2009, 2010, you're talking about 8% unemployment. Capital is not happening. It was tough times, but I think those lessons really carried us forward. But getting back directly to the question of verticalization, I think maybe the prime real estate might have been claimed. You might want to, that could be debatable, but anywhere like Salesforce being, okay, they went in and just disrupted an entire industry with a SaaS application. And it's happening when you look across the C-suite, look at all the different departments and go, who's got their tool? Salesforce has their, is the system of record for sales, and Marketo and some of those marketing automation tools are in the marketing department, and so on and so forth. Legal was left open, but I think maybe the big pieces of real estate might be taken, but there's anywhere, if you're looking at a vertical market in the B2B space, look on a job description, and any job that describes need Excel skills, you can take that job out. Like, go find that job and take it out. An analyst job, any sort of menial task, that like an accounting job, any sort of thing. I mean, there's so many opportunities, and it's just limited by creativity.
You took half of the things I was going to say, so well done.
Good.
We're that well aligned.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm a big fan of looking at stressed markets, or in the case of the U.S. retail marketplace, the prime example. Old entrenched businesses that are still in archaic information gathering practices, right? That are still using spreadsheets. Anything around business intelligence where you have disparate services. Information is becoming more and more of a problem to manage every single day. And as businesses grow, they need to get more and more aware of their competitive environment, right? So looking at aggregating large amounts of data that become actionable is your hook into a business, for me anyway. I was doing that at Quad Analytics down in San Mateo. But then we use it as a workflow tool. So once you get the hook in as the business analytics tool, then you get into workflow. And workflow gives you the all-time hook, period, full stop. Now you're in the business and no one can basically extract you. So, and you covered some great points, but I think if you can find a pain point around business intelligence and then capitalize on what is basically archaic function right now. You have 10 people in a room surfing on the internet and then doing basic keystroke data entry. It's ridiculous. And by the way, you'd be surprised how many huge companies are doing that right now, whether it's in pharma or retail. It's a travesty that people are still running businesses that way.
Yeah, and no doubt, and the point on spreadsheets is fabulous, right? I think if you've got a business or you're thinking about a business, especially in a B2B context, like go figure out where spreadsheets are being used, because they're used to circumvent crappy systems or hard-to-use systems or inefficient workflow, and they're places where people spend a ton of time building reports. And they're just, if you can unlock what I always refer to kind of this notion of a hero report, right? If you can make your user, your customer look good based on something that comes out of your system, you're going to get this dependency and they're never going to let you go.
I like the angle of, how do I help you get a promotion and get your bonus?
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, so, and I did provide the questions ahead of time in full disclosure. So we have rehearsed a bit here, but not.
You can go off script.
I don't know what you're going to say. I know what I'm going to ask. So we want to talk a little bit about broadly kind of the opportunity around SaaS. So entrepreneurs that are building businesses here are thinking about building a business, kind of the landscape and kind of what's going on, places to look. I want to get a little more tactical kind of into the topic around sales and marketing, customer acquisition, let's call it broadly. And one of the places I want to jump off on is around trials and a free trial or a paid trial or a trial in the process. So you built your product, you've dropped a press release, right? All of a sudden, you got a bunch of people coming to check you out. Not just from a product usage standpoint, but talk about that from not just your first 5, 10 customers, but as you scale the business and how that factors in. I don't know over the life cycle if you guys experimented with that.
Yeah. With the first product, we did and again, this goes, it sounds so dated, the freemium model and all of that. And I don't know, I'm not a believer in that as much, and the word trial. What we use, and in enterprise B2B, maybe that's where I'm biased and where my knowledge is. I don't think it's necessary. I think you should be able to find somebody who wants to put skin in the game, and if you need to get them and let them try the tool, do a proof of concept in a very controlled, very limited time frame that allows them, and you preset all of the conditions that the requirements ahead of time, and you go down the list. If you just kind of turn it on and let them use it, they're not directed, they aren't committed to it, and it doesn't really get the outcome that you think it's going to. So the more you can tighten that down, take that aperture and tighten it down to exactly, you want to be able to do this workflow or these actions and have these teams use it and get comfortable with it, that's fine. Here, we'll come in, we'll train you up, and we'll sit with you and do it, and then we'll run some test data. Tell me what your test data is. It's like get everything ahead of time agreed to, because any loose end, it's like a leak of commitment that you let out. So if you can tighten that down and really make sure that people are dialed into getting the business outcome that they want, and don't do it too early, hold out, it's the free milk thing. So yeah, I think there could be a place, especially in B2C applications, and I don't want to be too biased, but in B2C, there's a lot of free things, but Gmail's free, but that's because you're the product. So you've got to have a business model that really takes advantage of that kind of aggregation of user data or some other, or eyeballs or whatever, that kind of sells on a different level, but not on direct usage of the product for people to pay for, because people are cheap, especially individual consumers.
I agree. I think this goes to an old football
You get to
analogy.
answer the next one
Yeah,
first.
there you go.
I'm going to start with you next.
It's quite all right. I could play second chair for a little while. I don't mind. It's an old sports analogy in football. You can pass, right? You can run. And when you pass, you can have an incompletion. You can have an interception, right? You can have a penalty. You run the football, you hand it off, the guy goes 3 yards, and it's safer. When you do a free trial, you're exposing yourself to so much risk because you're not guiding that customer experience. They might not have a UI, UX experience that actually moves them along. You might give them all the value in the first 10 minutes and say, well, why would I buy this? I'll do a free trial once a year. I'll get all the efficacy out of the product I want. Bye-bye. Haven't paid a thing. It's, why buy the cow when I can get the milk, right? Guided trial is the way to go, especially in a SaaS environment. No doubt about it, yeah.
And I have seen over the last couple of years here companies that through a trial process begin to get some momentum, and let's say they get to their first $1 million or $2 million in revenue, and then struggle with account quality, contract size, and their DNA in the organization is already built around sort of this inbound responsive sort of, I'm going to take a trial and close them, versus a more disciplined outbound intentional targeting. I'm going to start with you this time. Have you seen this, and what is your perspective on that? And is it just a point you get to where you have to take your medicine, or do you need to start a certain way, or like how would you navigate that process if you did want to have a trial process? And then
it's probably the most uncomfortable feeling you have as a startup manager, is going from the inbound opportunities that are like, manna from heaven. And then all of a sudden you realize that, okay, maybe the market's getting more mature, there's more competition, maybe some price sensitivity, or moving to an outbound model is knowing full well that you have a different skill set that you have to add to your team. There's a longer sales cycle. Oftentimes, you're looking at probably a 3 to 6 month dry period where your hockey stick goes very flat or down. I hope you have money in the bank when you have to deal with that instance. It's not a pleasant experience. However, everything about that model is metrics, and more metrics. Measure 3 times, cut once. You have to know what your leading indicators are and your lagging indicators are. You have to fully define them. You all know what I'm talking about leading and lagging indicators, I hope. And if you haven't, that knowledge, number of calls made, number of meetings made, number of meetings held, how many proposals are going out, what deals you're closing, right? Your lagging indicators would be what's your time to close, what's your average AOV on those particular efforts, and what's your profitability on that. And then over time, you keep measuring 3 times, cutting once. It is vital because when you go from 0 to $1 million, that's one set of skill sets. 1 to 5 or even 1 to 10 is completely another set of management tools and skill sets. And then 10 to 50 is a completely different animal altogether, different stripes, different leg counts. It's a massive change. And one that you have to have the right management mentality to go from that inbound model to an outbound too, because the way you look at your team members becomes far more accountable in the revenue generation business.
Yeah, and just to build on that, it shouldn't be a surprise. It's the inevitable journey and the high class problems that you want to be able to solve, right?
Because first world problems.
Yeah, it's like you're moving up levels through a video game or something. It's like you start sending out and you start getting the inbound leads and you start converting them, and the sales cycles are short, but the ASPs are low. And then you go, oh, I think there's more promise there. And it's like, okay, now I need to have some hunters instead of gatherers. And it's a totally different sales motion. I think you can run them both in parallel. We do that. We still do it today. We've got 2 teams. There's a inbound team. They're in our parlance called SDRs, sales development reps, and then we have ISRs, and I can't remember what those stand for. Something sales rep.
Inside sales rep?
Inside sales rep. I think that sounds about right. Thank you. Forgot my own company. Thank you. I actually do work there. And ISRs are paired up with AEs, and they do target. And there's a newer idea for those of you who haven't really been exposed too much to this area called account-based marketing, where it's really more of a you choose your shots. You go, okay, I'm going to go sell my product because I think General Electric is the perfect user of my product. I'm going to just commit a human being to go chase that account and find out who all the buying unit is, engage them, find ways to get in front of them, and then propel that deal. And it can be a year, it can be 2 years, and sometimes it's really frustrating. I was just at it. We have our big trade show. It was about 3 weeks ago in New York, and I was kind of talking one of our AEs off the ledge a little bit. It's like we had a Fortune 5 gas company come in and talk to us with 10 people. I mean, dreamland, right? They did the same thing 1 year ago prior, and it's like, it doesn't feel like it moved. And I go, this is it's the curse, but also the blessing. It's like those longer sales cycles mean this is a very careful and meaningful decision to them. But once you close that, then you're the one that they're going to be stuck with. And if you're sticky and you've got it. So you've got to create these different mindsets. And sometimes they're different teams, and sometimes there's different mentalities. But typically, kind of the state of the art, I'd say nowadays, is you have 2 development rep teams, one inbound, one outbound, and then they both feed up to kind of account executives and different folks that kind of then end up closing the deal. They get it once they get the deal in motion, then they guide and project manage that to close.
One last piece to add, there's even a newer account-based thing
What?
now. I know. It's the new.
Acronym alert.
Yes, I won't give no acronym alert. It's account-based everything, where you're actually blending in your marketing efforts with your customer success efforts, with your sales engineering efforts, with your AEs and your inbound sales reps and your SDRs, so that everybody's focused in on, I'm Italian, right? So I do this.
I didn't tell anybody what your middle name was.
Yeah, I know. Careful back there.
What is it?
I'm sorry, I just did that.
Larry
we
Grella,
didn't discuss
what is
whether
your
or not I was supposed to
full
do that.
unadulterated name?
Wow, you guys must have set me up back there. So it's Lawrence Vito.
Yes! Don Vito.
So I was born in New York. I come from it, honestly, and I might have somebody in the waste removal business for you. Just saying. But no, the account-based everything concept is fantastic because you're aligning every single business unit in your company to go after that one set of accounts in a given marketplace. It's wonderfully strategic and gets everybody aligned and basically pulling in the same direction with their battles. But when you switch from the inbound model or the dependence of the inbound model, you do have this, I hate to say it, but a dry spell. But then the deals that are coming in, as you mentioned, much larger, much longer term lifetime value of those customers for sure.
Yeah.
And you find that they end up depending upon you for thought leadership because you didn't just sell them transactionally. It's purely consultative. It's a much, much better business model, especially for SaaS.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the part that gets pinched in that when you do the shift is retraining the mindset of the account executive, because often you're starting out with maybe a point solution or something, and then you graduate and you build it out, and it's more of a platform enterprise sale. And some of the account executives can't kind of cross that chasm. Like it's a different mindset. It's consultative. And yeah, why don't you probably are smiling from experience.
I'm laughing because when you're a startup, you're so happy if anybody takes your phone call, and I'm sure all of us here have experienced that at some point in time. It's like, oh my God, they want to take a meeting. This is fantastic. We have something. And then invariably you go through that meeting process and you realize, wow, 9 out of 10 meetings are a total waste of time. They don't really want to hear what I have to say. They're just kind of maybe learning a little bit of something. And you're also happy to pounce and vomit on people because the second they show any kind of buy signs, and then you realize, I haven't listened to one thing they've told me for the last 10 minutes. I haven't asked them one question. I don't know what their needs are, what the use case is. One other little acronym, by the way, that I will throw out.
Keep going, it's good.
Notice is
I'm having a good time.
there's a concept of 3 U's, and I always say that that's missing 2 U's. So user, use case, and usage. If you're in the SaaS business, you need to identify all 3 of those, but I think you're also missing UI and UX, right? So if you can define those 5 U's, you have a customer for life because you know how many times they're going to need your service, right? How many people in their business are going to use your service, how often they're going to use it, and then what you need to deliver to them in the way of a UI UX that says they can use it quickly, they can get benefit quickly, and it goes at scale over a long period of time. You deliver those 5 U's, you have a business that's the next Salesforce. So.
Yeah, great points. And the point on account-based everything or all things or whatever, I think it's very much of a B2B mindset, but you can apply it in B2C as well from a business-to-business standpoint. It's just sort of having the swagger of you know what your customers look like, you know who they are, and they will be yours. It may take some time, but then that's just that very intentional. We talked about intentionality and some of the other things. Just that methodical approach, I think, is super important. But it does take some patience, right? And so there's this tension in a high-quality sales funnel, right, between patient, qualified, targeted conversations, engagement, with the friction or the challenge of quarterly numbers, individual sales compensation plans, and those things. And I think it's especially challenging when we talked about trials, which maybe are qualified based on need. I want your thing, right? Versus, let's say, a marketing-generated lead, like a white paper, right? Someone qualified based on interest, and how you engage with those different types of conversations differently. And what this kind of gets at is sort of the essence of a lot of the conversation tonight, which is around kind of sales and marketing alignment, or how do you get sales and marketing to speak the same language. You guys have thoughts on that, or how you've seen that work or not work in what you've done?
That could be 45 minutes by itself.
We're going to go a little long tonight. Okay for everyone?
You know, the old saying, it's a marathon, not a sprint. This could be a really long marathon, an ultra marathon. I'll try and keep this short. The white paper leads that you receive, and those leads of a similar ilk, I always funnel to an SDR or an inside sales rep. It's really a qualification process. It isn't a real lead yet. It's a suspect, not a prospect. Just because someone wants to look at the car outside the glass of the showroom doesn't mean they actually have a budget to buy the car, or they have an interest in buying the car. It just might be an aesthetic. They could be even looking for competitive information and tire kicking in that capacity. So I always run them through the SDR process and qualify them before I actually move them up funnel to an AE. Let's face it, you're paying the AEs twice as much money, right? You've got to think about what's being put through that funnel. Whereas if you have someone who is a proper qualified lead that's coming through a different function altogether, they've seen a webinar and they now have a full good sense of what you do and how you do it, that might go right to an AE. It's almost like a self-selected lead. So.
And from a marketing motion, we build content to attract leads of all colors, and the nicknames that they use now are tofu, mofu, and bofu, which is top of funnel, mid funnel, and bottom funnel. So
more acronyms. Everybody write these down.
So tofu is, hey, lots of people are trying to do something new and cool, and here's why you might think about doing it too. Mid-funnel might be, now that you're shopping, here's what makes our product the right fit for you. And then bottom of funnel is like, here's how we implement, here's how we move through the contract process. Those are just general things. But as a marketing team, you're partnering to kind of execute the pieces, whether it's in digital formats or print formats, or we even do direct mail. I mean, believe it or not, direct mail is incredibly successful. You wouldn't think that would be true anymore, but it's so out of left field. When somebody gets something, they literally call you up and thank you for it. It sounds silly, but it's true. So I think, kind of coming back to the marketing sales alignment, I think one point that I want to really make loud is, and I'll tell a quick story. When we first got Zapproved going, and I wasn't a SaaS marketer. I learned to be a SaaS marketer on the job training. This experienced sales guy comes in and he sits down, and I had my sales VP next to me, and he sits down and he looks at us and goes, "Do you two hate each other yet?" And that really pissed me off. It's like, why would you assume that? And it's like, because you're not giving him good leads and he's not following up on your leads. And it's like, and from that really crystallized something for me. To me, the revenue team is one single team. Mm-hmm. It's like a football team. There's the offense and defense and special teams, and there's the marketing piece and the sales piece. So marketing goes and finds the leads, sales takes them and closes them, and then customer success or customer support, or CS is what it typically is called, keeps them. And in SaaS, churn is death. And so when you get them, if you keep them, it makes a huge difference to you and to your investors. I will tell you, we did a transaction in May with Vista Equity Partners, so we became part of their portfolio, and we're really proud of that. And one of the huge drivers for them was our LTV to CAC ratio. And so LTV is lifetime value. CAC is customer acquisition costs. And ours, because our churn, we have net negative churn in NC. So the customers that we enter with...
Just keeps getting better.
I know. There will be a test. We'll be doing shots on this one. But net negative churn is a really cool thing. It's highly coveted. It's where your existing customers... even though you might lose a few customers, you lose so little revenue that the revenue of expansion by the existing customer base more than overtakes that. So it's like you're continuously growing instead of like having a leaky bucket, and it makes lifetime value really attractive. And we had like a more than 20x lifetime value CAC to lifetime value ratio, and that drove a huge. That was a huge quotient in our valuation discussions.
That's exactly it. If you're raising a round of funding, you can raise it strictly on just your net negative customer retention number. At Rich Relevance, we had a 99.1% customer retention rate year on year for 3 years running. And that customer base actually was increasing by about 15% in annual revenue. So without touching anything in net new business, we were growing 15% year on year. Talking about going to an investor and saying, you might want to get a piece of this because we don't have to do anything and we'll still grow at 15%.
I'm going to fire everybody and just live off of this.
So, churn is massively important. It's not just getting the new business and the new badges, because again, when we're younger companies and we're starting, we want the badge, we want the validation, but you end up writing a lot of bad contracts that it's like when you first start dating as a youngster, really bad choices. The picker isn't good, right? You have to learn that you have to step away from some of those decisions fast because it hurts to make bad decisions.
You should have left swiped when you right swipe.
Exactly.
We're going to go to audience questions now.
Yeah, exactly.
I think maybe a good segue here, because you did actually hijack my final question on the sheet around metrics, which I think are important, right? These businesses can be instrumented, and now there's definitely a recipe that investors look for, both to invest in the company as well as to purchase a company or even potential acquirers. Like those are all very, very important things, and that's the math that we can do on these to sort of show the health of a company. And I'm with you on the churn thing, right? If you can nail that and keep your customers there and you can grow those customers, this just becomes this amazing engine of revenue.
Yeah, and I think, in particular, I think sales has been a lot more in that area. I'd say marketing has evolved very much. Like if you marketed 10 years ago versus today, it's not even the same profession, literally. It's like going from typesetters to digital, media developers and things like that. Because the tools now are there to measure everything, and marketing is totally revenue driven. I know what I spend to acquire every lead. I know exactly what the life cycle and the return on every investment, and we measure every channel. Every single action is measured within our system, and we won't do something unless you can measure it. Now, there's always going to be some other things, but the core functionality is for marketing to drive revenue. And it used to be marketing was arts and crafts. Hey, I built this awesome trade show booth. Check that out. And I got these clips, and they got 5 billion impressions. Isn't that amazing? And, those days are so gone and so over. And in fact, if I had children, which I don't, but if I did, I would say, go learn how to be a Marketo administrator right now, because you are going to be the most desirable, hottest profession for the next 10 years for sure.
Do you want my teenagers?
Bring them.
I can rent them out to you.
Bring them. Do they know Marketo?
They can probably figure it out. All right, we're going to go to audience questions, and keep me honest on time over here as well.
So I worked for about 15 years now for small companies, big companies, and one of the most frustrating things with software companies was the silos. The customer support team did not hear from the product team, which didn't talk to the engineering team, and I always just asked myself, why are these people working in silos? So what do you think was a tipping point for this new thing that you're calling, is it account-based?
Account-based everything.
Which should have been happening a long time ago. Did enough people hit their heads hard enough to realize, hey, there's got to be a more efficient way to do it? Or was it something technology-based that dictated this new change in that structure?
Yeah, all right, so the question's around functional silos and sort of non-cooperation that used to happen in the past, and if we're sort of on a new horizon of integrated sort of customer acquisition and everyone uniting around revenue.
I don't think,
summation,
here's what tipped it, recurring revenue model. So what happened, a SaaS business operates on recurring revenue. So here's how I describe it. This may be controversial. I want to decree that all marriages last only 3 years, period. Now, you can re-up with your loved one and say, I want another 3 years. But you know what? You're going to act very differently. If that were the rule, you wouldn't take people for granted. You'd buy flowers for birthdays. I mean, you would be much more attentive to needs, and you'd be a better partner.
Always be closing.
You would, whoa. It's a very visceral way to go, gosh, every year I have to go back to my customer base and ask every one of them to marry me again. And when you have that forcing function on your organization, it changes everything. So when I talk about one team being the revenue team, marketing, sales, like it happens over and over again. And if marketing isn't, if product isn't tuned into that, then they're going to get replaced. Like there has to be a fluidity of information in order to survive and maintain the metrics to be able to achieve what you want to achieve as a business. And to me, it isn't a technology per se interconnecting them. It's the business model shift that has happened with a recurring revenue model that is because of SaaS.
Business intelligence solutions has also pushed that envelope massively. Visibility and accountability into what your job function is and how it relates to the efficacy of other departments is now a systematized process. It's a practice. People that were running Amazon 10 years ago, 15 years ago, saw this as the future of the way they ran their efficient business. Nobody gets to run their business unit without thinking that they have some seriously quantifiable impact on the other business unit, right? So in running prior startups, when you have sales and you're thinking, well, I've got to grow the company from 5 million to 7.5, right? Okay, great, but if my folks that are in CS are losing 20% of my installed base, I don't sell 2.5 million, I got to sell 3.5 million bucks, right? Bit of a challenge. So now we start leaning on the CS folks to be more productive and help me get to that revenue number so we have a different valuation. The marketing person is, no offense, but back in the day, 20 years ago, it was a lot of fluff. I got this great lifestyle piece, a lot of fluff.
Total.
I'm going to do these print ads, and everyone's going to feel really good about us. And over 20 years, they'll buy your stuff. No, we've gotten to click attribution and buy button attribution, right? So now marketing folks are held to the same accountable standards that we are in sales. What's your level of effort? What's your spend? What's my return on investment or return on ad spend? When you actually then codify all of that and make it an account-based everything, you have weekly, bi-weekly meetings where every department head gets in a room and says, what are you doing to get these accounts across the finish line? And you actually have to stand and deliver in front of everybody. All the silos get torn down. And that's really where every successful SaaS business is going.
All right, I think we can do one more question. So who's got a good one? And if I don't like it, I'll change it. Totally teasing.
No pressure.
Awkward. So one, I really appreciate everything you guys are saying. I actually regretted getting into marketing until about 2 or 3 years ago. Because I hate
It's how you weaponize a liberal arts degree, by the way.
Just let it all out.
Go into marketing.
Well, I actually
Weaponize
got
life.
an economy in it. I got my degree in economics, so marketing really felt painful for me. But now that we actually are in this role, I love account-based marketing and everything it's doing. I'm actually in product marketing and trying to take some of the SaaS stuff that's happening into that. One of the things that you mentioned earlier about that hockey stick and then getting to that place of either plateauing or starting to go down. You mentioned, the lag times, lead times, and all of those metrics. At what point did you start measuring that? Do you feel like you should have done it earlier so that you were prepared to actually start strategizing ahead of time? What would your recommendation be on having the answers
Sure.
for that?
Yeah, so the question's when should you begin to measure, essentially? Not to be too short a point on it, but these leading indicators and lagging indicators we're talking about, when do you have enough data to have it be meaningful?
So when I was younger, dumber, and had a lot more VC money behind a business or two that I've run, I was very aspirational and utopian. And I thought, we'll just flip the switch and we'll just keep knocking out leads every 2 or 3 weeks. No, it's about a 3 to 6 month period, depending upon the actual size of the sale, right? If it's sub $50,000 and it's not highly technical, you can pretty much flip that switch in 3 months to 6 months with ease. Where there's a much more consultative sell and it's actually an organization-wide implementation, you might be talking 12 months, right? So you went from an inbound tool, shall we say, that you said, well, for every 20 leads that come in, we're going to convert 2, AOV of $50,000. Great, just do the math, right? When you go outbound and when you start thinking about a more sophisticated sale with an account-based everything model, you've got to assume that the touch points are 5 times greater. And now, mind you, the return on that investment will be seen and in spades, but it takes about 6 months. So you start from day one and start tracking the metrics, because once you start to see the hit, you have to look back from day one and say, okay, great, how do we measure twice again and cut once? But if you wait that 6 months, what you end up doing is delaying your success factor by another 6 months, because you'll be working on really funky data.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. It's like, start on day one, and if it's not day one, pretend like it's day one. Measure everything from the start. And I think because I was a co-founder that was a marketer, we always had that built into the DNA of the company, and it's been really critical for us to be able to adjust and know where our investments were. I mean, when we first came out, we were trying to sell to everybody, and then the data revealed to us that, we should be really the corporate legal teams are the ones that are really feeling the pain that we're solving. So that's where we go, and that became, now we're dominant in that space. But we we didn't know that. We didn't guess that. We guessed wrong, honestly. But you've got to look at the data and be humble to it, because you can't assume, you can't interpret it, and have, you can maybe have a hypothesis, but just let the data be the ruler.
Yeah, so Julie's over here about to either hit us with these
Come on,
glass
Julie.
mugs or
You said you were a
time's
fan.
up or
Now we want one more
combination thereof,
question.
And it's empty.
I'm presenting you all with
There's
this
a hole in this
gift. This is a
glass.
PubTalk gift. So what happens is you, if you bring these back to any PubTalk, McMenamins will fill it up for free. It's your trophy
Lifetime
for a job well
value.
done.
Flying over
Lifetime
here
value.
every time.
Yeah, right?
Thank
Good
you very
job.
much.
Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.